In our previous episode, Marcel deployed a revolutionary water technology in the village of Zerzura, where people were working long hours to fetch water. However, Marcel's innovation also disrupts the social construct of the village, and if people were initially happy with the water, they didn't want to change their old habits, and conflicts started to emerge. Ultimately, they turned to Sami Seymour, the village mayor, and asked him to do something about it. Sami Seymour started to feel threatened that he could lose his job in the process, but he had no clue about how to address the problem. Surrendering to the pressure, he decided to stop using Marcel's solution and send the people back to fetching water. As a result, the people of Setresho were left without Marcel's solution, a solution that could have provided direct access to clean water and that was undeniably an improvement in the long term of the living condition in Zerzura. And the responsibility of this failure was shared between Marcel, who got blindsided, the villager who relied too much on the authorities to solve their problem, and on Sami Semhold, who put the preservation of his power above the greater good. Because, as Bertrand Russell said, as soon as we abandon our own reason and are content to rely upon authority, there is no end to our troubles. In today's video, we are going to focus on the relationship between Sami Seymour and the villagers, and try to understand what were the dynamics at play that again prevented the villagers to adapt to a better reality. And for that, we are going to talk about authority. In the very first video, we saw that by using a noun instead of a verb to describe the exercise of entrepreneurship, we trigger an interpretative behavior where the focus shifts from the action and the context where the actions take place to the individual carrying out the actions. Well, in reality, it is even more limited than that, because attention is often given to only one individual, the person in authority, the CEO, and an amalgam is created bundling together the individual, his role, and his personal attributes. In the previous video, to address that amalgam, we use a trick to shift our attention back to the action by placing the problem we are addressing at the center of a web of stakeholders. We are going to use a similar trick for the concept of authority. Instead of viewing authority as a set of rights granted to a title or to a role, I would like you to try to view authority as a transaction. This will have several advantages that we are going to explore in this and in the next videos. Because once you separate the authority from the individual, you can use the resources, the influence, and the power for all sort of purpose and tasks that have little to do with the simple coordination of activities or people. So what would be that transaction? When you join a new company, or when you go to see a doctor, or when you manage your team, or in your role as a parent, you are part of a social contract between two parties. One party, the subordinate, accepts to grant its docility, and by that I mean its attention, its compliance, and its resources such as time and effort in exchange of a set of services from a second party, the authority. And these services are actually very limited. The first one is direction. This is the most clearly understood service associated to authority. The authority decides where the organization should go and what are the list of tasks to be carried out. The next service is related to protection. And in the case of an employment, for example, this is your paycheck and all the things that are in place to guarantee that you are healthy and work in safe conditions. If it's your household, that's your ability to provide a roof, food, and clothes to your kids. And finally comes the maintenance of order. And this could include services such as distribution of role and task, regulation of conflict, or the creation and the maintenance of norms that the group will follow. When the authority fails to provide these services, then the social construct loses its bond, its legitimacy, and non-productive behavior starts to emerge. employees leaving a company if they are not paid, or children losing confidence and developing psychological issues when the parents are failing. And that's what happened to Semi-Same-Old in Marcel's case. When confronted to the adaptive challenge exposed by Marcel's solution, the villager turned to Semi-Same-Old to address their problem. But because the problem was to reinvent new way of doing things, for which Mr. Semi-Same-Old had no expertise, he simply could not. And as a result, he decided to do the only thing he knew how to do, exercise authority, and apply a simple technical fix to ask villagers to stop using Marcel's solution. Then the problem was solved. Of course, he could have tried instead to understand what was going on, what were the losses at risk, or the loyalties that had to be renegotiated. In other words, try to identify the adaptive challenges and help the villager address them. But that is exactly what we are trying to do here in this channel. So now that we understand better how authority can be seen as a transaction, how will that apply to an entrepreneur and her startups? Because in the context of scarcity of resources inherent to a startup, these services usually cannot be reliably provided. So let's have a look. Ideally, in a well-established organization, the direction is already pretty well defined. That's the company's strategy. It may not be perfectly defined, but you do have an idea of what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. In a startup, however, and in particular in the early stages of a startup, the direction is very malleable. And it has to go through a certain number of loops to verify that the concept is worth the time and effort. A startup is often pivoting, as we say in the jargon. Things such as market estimates, competitive assessment, customer feedbacks, or technical validation may all require the startup to constantly change its direction and adapt to a new context with its own set of issues. In terms of protection, being able to provide a paycheck and a minimum set of benefits seems to be part of the normal services to be expected when you are employed anywhere. But in a startup, it is unfortunately not uncommon to not get paid or to have no benefits. Scarcity of resources is maybe the most important issue a startup has to confront. And in terms of order, it is the same. When working in a well-established firm, everything will be clearly delineated. Process will be in place. Norms will be there to guide you. And an organization chart will probably show you where you exactly stand in the food chain. A startup starts without any role defined, and the process of clarifying this role and the distribution of authority will occupy the mind of the people for a very long time and will create conflicts. But startups are also a fantastic environment for this conflict to emerge and to be solved quickly. And in terms of norms, startups and startup incubators are famous for the eccentric norms of what is socially acceptable, like playing video games during work hours and crazy team building events and fancy building with latte and kombucha dispenser. What I'm trying to do here is to draw a parallel between a well-established company and a startup and connect the comparison with the concept that we already introduced in an earlier video, the concept of technical problems and adaptive challenges. In a well-established company, all the services related to authority are already in place. Everything that had to be learned was learned. The expertise necessary to address any concern has been acquired by the organization. In other words, we are in the realm of the technical problem, where the exercise of authority is very well adapted. In a startup, everything has to be established. Direction, protection, order. Everything is fluid. The expertise is not yet there and has to be acquired or learned. We are in the realm of adaptive challenges. And here, we need people who are flexible, willing to work without direction, accepting collaboration as equal, and willing to question themselves. In other words, people who are able to work without the comfort provided by authority. However, or maybe paradoxically, the strategy of a startup is to acquire that same kind of authority as a well-established firm, so that the startup has the influence necessary to address the problem that it is trying to solve. A startup is like a caterpillar, but a Benjamin Button type caterpillar, edging the other way. You start as a tiny, beautiful butterfly flying around, nimble and acrobatic, and once you spot a good place to grow, you become this huge and ugly caterpillar with 1,000 feet that will eat the giant leaves that your problem is representing here. And how do you do that? To answer that question, we need to go to the next stage of our understanding of authority and look at authority as the capital you build. You see, in our transaction representation that we showed earlier, the subordinate provides its attention, compliance, and resources to the person in charge. And for a startup, guess who are the subordinates? The employee, for sure. But there is another one, much less intuitive. Who else in a startup accepts to give its attention, its resources, and its compliance with respect to the use of that resources? Tick tack, tick tack, tick tack. Well, it is the investors, and maybe you did not expect that one, right? Because sometimes the investor exchanges his investment with a position in the board that grant him his authority back. But not all investors are in the board. Anyway, I'm not going to expand on that, and I'm just dropping this as a thought-provoking idea. However, if we go back to our investors, I am 100% sure that I don't need to convince any entrepreneur that had to raise funding from an investor that attention is the real fuel of a startup, even more than money. Because without the attention of potential financial partners, you don't get the resources you need to build your startups. And to get that attention, what do you need? You need authority. That means that you need to demonstrate that you are capable of providing the services of direction, protection, and order. And to be able to demonstrate that, you need cash and resources. So again, we have another iterative process here. To get resources, you need attention. To get attention, you need authority. To get authority, you need validation. But to get validation, you need resources. But usually in a startup, you start from scratch, you have nothing. So first, you try to convince your family, your friends, and the fools around you to give you some resources, to start working on your idea. And for that, you will invest your personal capital of authority. With that initial money, you will do some demonstration work that may give you enough credibility, another word for capital of authority, to get the attention of a seed investors. Luckily, it will give you more resources for the next stage of your startup, another validation. Once you have a better validation, if successful, you will start to be recognized by the environment around you. Your capital of authority will increase, which will give you access to a new set of investors who will probably want you to start to formalize that authority into better governance, processes, milestones, organization charts, which are meant to provide direction, protection, and order. And this will continue and on and on. And if you are successful, you will end up being this giant caterpillar. If you are not, you may end up being a butterfly smashed on a car windshield. In the next videos, we are going to expand on these stages of startup growth, and we will use them to refine our understanding of authority. But for now, bye.